Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and start we're already recording, so we're good there. Fantastic. Well, hello, everybody. I am Melissa Lazaro, the Director of Marketing for MindPrint Learning. We're so glad that you chose to join us today to learn how to empower every student by integrating data on the whole child into MTSS. Today's webinar is brought to you by MindPrint Learning and Otus. We are partners, and so we love partnering together with our customers and supporting students across the United States and beyond. MindPrint Learning is the only strengths-based MTSS solution empowering teachers and students with learning strategies matched to their unique cognitive strengths. Otus is a K-12 student growth platform. Otus allows you to gather, visualize, and act on student growth data with an all-in-one integrated platform. And you're about to see what that looks like towards the end of our webinar today. I'll be introducing our guest speakers and going over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So today's webinar will be recorded. That's the question that's always asked is, will I get the recording? Absolutely. Give us a week and we'll send that over to you along with any resources that are shared today. As well as contact information. The last slide does have our contact information, but we'll make it easy for you to reach out to us. All questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A. We're blessed to have our Senior Director of Learning, Vicky Algieri, who is going to be looking at the Q&As and answering them in live time, and then saving any questions that she thinks will be beneficial to the entire audience. She'll save those towards the end for our Q&A period. Our presentation, as I mentioned at the beginning, will be about 45 minutes long with some time for Q&A. And so we'd love your participation at the end. Put those questions in the Q&A and we'll create that dialogue. So today we're fortunate to have a terrific panel and I'm excited to introduce you to those folks. We have Craig Velleux, who is a data specialist at Salem School District in Wisconsin. And not from Salem, Oregon, but Salem, Wisconsin. And then we have from Oregon, we've got Dr. Greg King with us from Portland, Oregon. And Dr. Greg King is the Director of Research at MindPrint Learning. He was a data scientist at NWA prior to joining MindPrint, and he's a former educational practitioner and policy analyst. And then finally, we have Hillary Pleppel with Otus, who's a community manager and can speak and support the power of a student-centered data platform. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of integrating cognitive data. What is cognitive data? Do you have that on your students or not? And how do you implement or integrate this into your MTSS framework? And why is it so important to do so? And what we're going to go ahead and have Craig introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background and what drove him to connect with MindPrint Learning and gathering that cognitive data. And then we'll have Greg speak to the science behind integrating the data on the whole child in an MTSS framework. So Craig, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your district's focus, some of the pain points your district was experiencing? I mean, I think these are probably likely known and similar pain points that our audience is experiencing. And so I know that they've gathered with us today to find a solution for it, hear what others are doing in this space and how we can really move the needle for students. So if you could go ahead and just kick us off, we'd love to hear that.
For sure. Craig Velleux, I'm the data specialist at the Salem School District in southeastern Wisconsin. I was a math teacher here for 19 years, math interventionist and data specialist for the last year and a half or so. And part of my job is looking at students and trying to decide in our MTSS systems which students should be qualifying for interventions and which students should, and then also looking at what are the best ways to support all of our students. Obviously, I think that's the goal, for every school district is you want to find as individualized of ways to help all students as possible, but time is very often an issue and we don't have a lot of it. If you've ever been in a classroom, that things get added on and added on and added on for you to do, and you don't get more time to do those things. So that's where we're at. Pain points for us. What made us decide to kind of look at MindPrint? We have a lot of data, obviously, for all of our kids. And with Otus, we'll show you later, we have a way to put all of that data together. And in deciding the roles, or not the roles, the assignments for students in our MTSS system, which kids should be receiving which levels of intervention and which supports to give specific kids, that's often done by people like myself who don't know all of the kids. We just see all of the numbers, and in our system we have a flow chart that says if your kid has this percentage on this test and is below this percentile on this test, and has these grades, they need tier 3. And we're finding that while that's great with the numbers, we're missing a piece. We're missing some quantitative data that's going to help us decide, are these the right kids? Because oftentimes we'll find that we're getting kids in some of these groups that shouldn't be, because the data says they should be, but they clearly have the skills once you get them in those groups, that they were somehow misplaced or misdiagnosed. And so we want to eliminate that, number one. And number two is in the classroom, you will very often have students in your classroom that are very, very intelligent in different ways. And how do I connect with all of those kids in a way that makes learning meaningful to them? Because that they can do some of the things, but they aren't necessarily producing in the class. Like, we have these kids that score these super awesome high scores, but it's not transferring to the classroom. So those were kind of our two biggest pain points that made us need to look for this next piece. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, Greg, you were going to share about the importance and the research behind looking at whole child data. You know, most schools, they've got the academic data, they've got the SEL data, but that missing piece, right? So if you could share a little bit about the importance of integrating that missing piece in the whole child lens.
Yeah, I think so. Craig kind of alluded to it, and we'll get into more detail, but the idea that we are missing some sort of piece of information has been around for a while, and neuroscientists have been trying to figure this out and talk about this for over a decade. Unfortunately, oftentimes as researchers, we overcomplicate our language. So this is a graph that some neuroscientists, they've met and said, we need to introduce cognitive neuroscience into education in more accessible ways. And here's our graph to make it more accessible, which is not very accessible if you look at it, right? But it's intuitive when we start breaking down these terms of what we're talking about. We really do know that how individuals and groups behave and perform are related to what we see in assessments and outcomes. We know that. And we know that those two things are somehow, in some way, partially due to how kids learn, right? How the brain functions, how we process information, the things that we use to input information embedded in our neural pathways and actually allow us to access that information later. We know that how we learn is an integral part to both how we behave and how we feel about our learning and how we demonstrate our knowledge. We haven't done a great job at making that a practical piece of the education experience. So the first step of saying, hey, we know we're missing a piece. How do we actually talk about the science of learning? That's one thing that we've talked about. So talking about the whole child is something we've done for a while. We might use different language, but if you go to the next slide, when we actually look at what we're talking about, when we say whole child, we're relating it to cognitive skills. How do I learn? What are the pieces that help me understand complex information, all those pieces of information we need and want kids to know? How does it help me feel better about how I'm learning and what I know and my ability to learn? And how do I actually showcase that knowledge and brilliance on an assessment? That's what whole child education is. So we've taken this kind of really complicated model of cognitive neuroscience. We've said, all we're saying is we need a piece of how we learn in order to create a three-legged stool that our students can stand on and teachers can actually teach, right? If we only have two legs, it's really hard for that stool to stand. But when we add in some cognitive skills, we can actually get at some additional information that is connected, that is understandable, and that then we can make practical to our educators and to our environment, to our students too, and empower them equally to what we empower our teachers, right? So if we go to the next slide, what this looks like in a practical way is our students have this whole child, right? Our students are whole people. Maybe they have academic challenges. They, may fail in quizzes and exams. They may not be feeling good about what their learning is. Their confidence may be going down. We may see that as a teacher, as an educator, right? We all can relate those back to students. The students, it's kind of like this doom loop, right? Why should I try if I know I'm going to fail? So I stop trying and I start failing, and that reinforces my ability that I don't know how to learn and I'm going to fail. And then it just makes me act out. And then I get bored in class. I'm like, I'm going to fail. What's the purpose of this anyways? And we see that doom cycle going on. What if we can interrupt that? What if we could change that? And we add in some cognitive data where maybe a student has strong visual learning or weak visual memory, right? Like how do these things about how they process information maybe impact their well-being, maybe impact their academic challenge? And can we provide strategies to interrupt that? And that's the next step, is providing strategies to say, here are the practical things you as an educator, you as a student can do to help show that it's not about just, you can't do this. It's if we help you and draw out these strategies and help build into you the ability for you to see your own strengths and then apply those things, you're going to see different results, which could break that doom cycle. Maybe you start seeing different results on a small scale, and then you go, oh, I can do this, right? And I think as educators, those of us who have spent time working with students in classroom, we know when we've kind of done something a little bit so that we can deliver it to a student that's struggling. We know what that feeling is like when those students' light bulbs turn on, right? Like that instant where they're like, I can do this, and how that changes their interaction in the classroom. And I think that's part of this whole approach and the reason why we're talking about this. So I'm going to stop talking because that's the theory behind it. And that's some of the practical, but I think what we're talking about today is how does this look like once you take all of this theory and all of these ideas that we're kind of building into very practical ways and actually live it and build it.
Mhm. Well, I'm just looking at this evidence-based, strategy right here and thinking, and I'm sure the audience is thinking, yeah, that's a great strategy. All kids should use this. But I think what you're saying is that light bulb moment is going off for the kids where this is critical for them to know, right? It's
Yes.
critical for them to use this particular strategy. But in order to know which particular strategy, we got to have that cognitive data to feel that piece, right? So
We have to know how they're learning. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. So Craig, if you could just walk us through what this experience looked like, for you in discovering this missing piece of cognitive skills, and share a little bit about the data. You're a data specialist. This is what you do all day long, right? And so you're looking at data all day. And if you could just share the data that you're looking at, and then taking it to the next level, so we can kind of understand, Greg's theory and practice, and then what you're actually doing.
Yeah, like Greg just said, there are an infinite number of strategies out there that we can try. And as teachers, like when I was in the classroom, I had my bag that I used very often. But you find that you can try strategies and they don't work, and you try another strategy and it doesn't work, and you're just picking them out of the air because they've worked for some other kids, and not all the kids are the same, and they don't have the same skill sets. So getting down to how the kid is going to access the information and how their brain is going to process it is probably very beneficial in deciding what strategy to use. Now, prior to MindPrint, we have all kinds of data. We have our regular classroom grades. We have in Wisconsin, we call this the NWEA. We say the letters. I know other places you just call it NWEA. I'm probably wrong, but I'm saying we have our NWA, our map growth testing data. We have Ames. We do Ames Web diagnostic testing, and we have our Wisconsin State Forward exam. We have a lot of academic data, and we also have some SEL data. We have our behavior data for our students. We have Panorama, which is an SEL survey that talks about different kinds of aspects of the children, and then we have attendance data, which is attendance data, right? It can be very telling, if a kid's not here, how are they going to learn? How do we address that? But the piece that we were missing was the cognitive piece, the how are these kids learning most effectively, and they're all different, right? And so we have added in kind of the MindPrint piece, but we have integrated it into the Otus platform. Now, Otus is a place for all of our data to be housed in one place, because before we had Otus, we had 100 spreadsheets, or the table is covered and stuff, and I'm sitting there trying to figure all this stuff out and how to create this giant, enormous spreadsheet and make it work, and it's a very difficult process. But what Otus does is it takes all of this information and it puts it all in one place. So I can say in Otus, I want to look at my NWEA fall map testing data for reading, and I also want to look at our Ames Web screener for reading. I can look at any information that we have and put it all together. And very often from the outside, I'm looking at the numbers and saying this kid needs X, Y, or Z based on these numbers. And sometimes we're wrong. And when we're wrong, it's costing other kids to miss out on potential opportunities that they could have. So if there was a step in between here's all the numbers and here's what we're going to do about it, that kind of offered us that how piece. And that's where the MindPrint came in. And so initially with MindPrint, we gave the MindPrint diagnostic screener assessment, to our 3rd through 8th grade population here. Started out with our 6th grade population, and it's really nice. It comes through, there's a graph, it says, here's your kid's cognitive skills, here's where they're strong, here's where they're weak. This kid has strong verbal memory, this kid has low executive functioning skills, and it breaks down the kid for you and tells you the areas where they are strong in their cognitive abilities or with their cognitive skills. But looking at that on my end as an outside of the classroom kind of a person, it's really easy for me to say, well, put these kids together because they think alike, and put these kids together because they don't think alike. But I had no way to put that with how are they actually doing in class? How are their scores coming across? Are they coming across like they should? And I wanted a way to kind of integrate the cognitive skills with those academic skills, with the numbers piece that we all have. And again, that's where Otus came in. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the process we're going to be going over, and how MindPrint is going to help, I guess. So in the next slide, you can see in Otus, this is a screenshot from our Otus platform. You're going to find this is all of the different data that we currently have stored in Otus. We have our Ames Web Plus. There's 2 more Ames Web Plus tabs there because we progress monitor our tier 2 and tier 3 students for reading and math with Ames Web as well. And that data is also housed in there, but we have it housed separately so we can just look at the progress monitoring data versus the diagnostic data. We upload behavior. You see the little MindPrint logo there. That's a brand new one this year. We have our map growth data from this year, our map historical data, like I said, panorama and state testing data. So I have all of these different data that I can look at, but how do we piece it all together? So prior to MindPrint, what we did this for a couple of different ways. Yeah, you can go to that slide, that's fine. This might be helpful. So in Otus, there are ways as an administrator that you can get specific groups of kids and say, I want to see these kids. So we started off with this one right here that you're looking at. And I said, I want to see all of the kids in my building whose Ames Web Plus silent reading fluency in the fall. So at the beginning of this class, this school year, was less than the 25th percentile, because that's our kickoff point in determining, does this kid need something extra in reading, or is our tier 1 or universal or regular classroom curriculum working for that kid? Mm-hmm. So show me below the 25th percentile. All right. And then we want to have more information, right? Because we're not going to base this on one number. So then they also took the NWEA map growth tests in reading, and I said, show me for that same window, kids that were below the 25th percentile on our map tests in reading. And that's where it stopped before. And we'd get this big giant list. And then I would go to the teachers and say, here's a list of all of these kids. Tell me which ones, because we can't do them all, right? Because you can never do them all. So instead, what we did was we added this third component that says in MindPrint. So we have all of our MindPrint data now integrated with all of the testing data that we have, and said, well, verbal reasoning is a cognitive skill that is linked to reading comprehension, right? Kids with high verbal reasoning tend to be able to do well in reading comprehension. So I said, now I want to see all of the students who have a verbal reasoning score greater than or equal to 4, because kids with a verbal reasoning score greater than or equal to 4 typically aren't going to be scoring below the 25th percentile. Right? They should or could score better than what they are. They could outperform what's happening. So once we do this, now when we put this in there, this is going to give us a subgroup of kids that are below those 25th percentiles that potentially could be meeting those intervention benchmarks. But is there something else we can do with these kids other than take them aside and give them this intervention that might give them some agency in their own learning and allow them to just use their strengths in a way that they don't know how? So that's what this one is, right? So, and then on the next slide, what happens is I do that and it pops up. This is the exact screen that Otus shows me. It says at Salem Elementary. It gives me the breakdown of the grade, all the subcategories that we have. It tells me exactly how many kids in my building meet this criteria. I can break this down grade by grade. I can do this all at once. I can do this by a specific cohort. Show me all the English language learners in my building. I can click a button and it'll make the rest of it go away and just show me the English language learners, whatever categories I want. But I now have data. I have this group of kids who didn't perform well on reading, but maybe they could, right? And so now what am I going to do about that? Like, this is the part where we got stuck before, right? Like, now what? Now, well, this strategy worked 7 years ago, and this strategy my grandma used, and I have these 4 strategies that the person next door used and worked for them, but I don't know which one's going to work. So then we go beyond here, and I can take these kids and I put them in a subgroup in Otus, which would be the next slide, I think. Yeah, so here's the list of kids. Obviously, names have been removed. It just basically, now those boxes on the left in Otus, I just click all those boxes, and then it takes me to the next slide. And right here, I can say, put all of these kids in a group. And we have set up groups here for all of these different MindPrint strategies. So we have assignment completion, we have math, number sense fluency, concepts and applications, just math fact fluency, reading fluency, reading comprehension. There's all of these different areas that we can address. But what I'm concerned with here is reading comprehension with this specific example. So I'm going to take all of these kids and I'm just going to put them into the group that says reading comprehension 1. So MindPrint reading comprehension 1. And what that's going to do is MindPrint has a very specific strategy for this group of kids, right? And what I would do then is I take that group of kids and I assign them this strategy and say, now you're going to try this strategy out, right? Because it works for people who have skills like you do, who learn like you do. So we're going to try this out, and whatever that thing might be, maybe the reading comprehension is you just need to read it out loud. Like, it could be something as simple as that, and that might make all the difference for the kid. But it works for kids who score like this but end up with the MindPrint in this case verbal reasoning that should show better reading comprehension.
And so what you're doing is highly targeted, personalized learning based on data-driven insights.
Correct.
Right? So you're using the data to drive these types of decisions, but bringing it all together to then see what is this whole child view of what's happening, and not just of this child, but how can we group them together and really give them the most effective strategies for this particular group. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about all the teachers out there that are just like doing this manually, right? Like pulling it together and prepping every night. And you've really done the heavy lifting for them by just leveraging the technology and the science that's out there, it seems.
Well, and like I said earlier, like teachers have enough to do. If I can do this in the background and just tell them, hey, have your kids go here, and just give them a quick explanation at some point as to how this came to be, like it's one less thing for them to do. It's one less place for them to go. We use Otus. We obviously house all our data here, but we also enter assessments here. Our grade book is partially here, going to be all here. Parents have access to this, so the parents can see what we're putting in there. There's blogs, like the Otus platform is crazy big, and just integrating this piece in there, it gives the teachers one less place to go again, one less password.
I kind of derailed you on that comment. So did you have another slide? Do you have another?
I think the next slide, you can go to it.
Okay. Oh,
It was just showing the groups. So I put
Okay.
those in the groups, and then I'm going to assign this group of kids this strategy. And then here at school, we have what's called reach time. Some people have RTI time or win time or whatever your mascot is time, but it's like a dedicated time in the day where kids work on math or reading or intervention time or extensions. And the goal ultimately is to one day a week, like have the kid go in and look at this MindPrint strategy, whatever their personalized strategy or strategies are, figure that strategy out through the boost lesson, because we attach the boost lesson in Otus. So they just click and it goes right there. They do their boost lesson, and then we have them, the goal is to have them then practice that strategy in the regular other classes where it's relevant. Because if it would help with reading comprehension and it's a cognitive skill set, it could be a lifelong thing that says, like, like this is the way that I learn it the best. I found a way where I can be successful, so I'm going to apply it everywhere. We all do it. Like, I have Post-it note people here at work that they have to have Post-it note. I have rewrite it people here at work that have to rewrite it. We have people that won't touch a notebook. They're a lot younger than me. And that everything has to be digital, but
Yeah.
we're finding ways. All these people have their own ways. We have figured out for us what works, but some of us, it's been a lot harder than others.
Mm-hmm.
Why not make
Well,
it
and I think a question popped up was like, what do these strategies look like? And we briefly alluded to it, when Greg was talking, but if any of the audience members out there, we'd be happy to share, an example of our strategies with you. Get my email address at the end of this webinar, and I'd be happy to share that with you. We'll also put it in the follow-up email next week so that you can get a sample of what that looks like. But I think, Hillary, you had a few questions about the implementation, because we're trying to jump ahead a little bit of the questions here with the audience of like, all right, but like, how much time does this take, and how much money does this cost, and how do I do this at my school? Because gosh, yeah, if I can take the burden away from a teacher having to do one more thing and really simplify the differentiation in the classroom, like I'm all in. This is definitely the missing piece. So Hillary, could you just maybe ask, you got these questions prepared, I think, for Craig.
Yeah.
And,
I would
kind of
love
talk
to.
through
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, and it's fun seeing it from a different side, right? Like I always see just all of our Otus stuff, but seeing everything together, and being a former high school math teacher, I was the Post-it note girly with them all over my computer and whatnot, and this kid and this group of kids. So how awesome is it to see it all in one place? And as far as the data, Craig, bringing the MindPrint data and all the other data into Otus, but specifically with Salem, how was that process for you specifically and your team through Salem? What, did you find it any different from any of your other data looking at it, Otus platform?
Well, obviously it's different type of data. It's stuff that we've never had, and we're adding it to all this other data. As far as getting the data to Otus, super easy. I just, the data team at Otus is super nice and friendly, and you know them all by their first name and say, hey, I need this thing. And they've never had MindPrint before. So they basically built it for me. It was, here's what it looks like on their platform. I want it to look similar on your platform, but now I can also then put it in with the other stuff. And it's so getting it there was pretty easy. It's if you know how to export a spreadsheet, done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's all it is, right? A spreadsheet, and then it's in there and pretty looking. And it takes that extra burden away from you and your teachers, and whatnot. Just give it to us and we'll put it in there for you. And then what kind of benefits, I'll skip to that last one, have you seen throughout the district versus specific classrooms, teachers, individuals, with all of now having this all in one place and being able to view it?
Just being visible to everybody and easily. Teachers can go in and view it. Students can go in and view it. Their parents at any point in time can go in and view this and all of their other data. And it really just, it shows the potential that the kids have, like every single one of us has potential. It's just some's unlocked easier than others. And again, we're just trying to make that as easy as possible, all while reducing that burden on the teachers and administrators and parents, and saying, this is what we found for your kids. And so bringing the data together is awesome, but MindPrint also has their own pool of data. And Greg, having worked with NWEA, I've had discussions with him. So they'll say, like, on the NWEA, kids with your specific cognitive skills typically score around here on math. Here's where your kids scored. It's not where I don't want to say typical, but kids with your skill set score. So here's another idea, a different idea on how to move the needle. So they have their whole own piece within their platform as well, but looking at it from that giant lens of everything, again, super duper fun and easy.
Yeah, to bounce off of that, the pretty colorful slide, when you're building, we call it query in Otus. When you're building that and taking each of the data, that's on you and the data team. What kind of lift is that? How is it to create those reports?
If you have a system in place, creating that report, like we have a list of, to meet this, be in this group, you have to be A, B, C, like that report to pull, as long as you know the criteria before going in, a minute, 2 minutes to make it. It's not, depends on how long it is. Like we have one now that we'll be integrating MindPrint into for like acceleration in math, that query, instead of 3 pieces of information, because we're essentially having kids skip an entire year of math, like we want as much as we can. I think there's like 40 of those in there. That one took a little bit longer. But yeah, these simple little ones like that, it's quick, fast, a minute.
Amazing. Just a quick little plug on our side. It's awesome to see kind of both of us come together between MindPrint and Otus, and then all these districts. Otus does help, right, see the entire student in one place and be able to take this unbelievable MindPrint data and all the other state tests that are required and whatever. We had discussed before that the decision makers on who gets services, who doesn't get services, don't specifically know the students, but all of this together as a whole is going to allow for the district to view the data, like each individual student to view the data, their own data, view, like you said, the parents, the teachers, and really kind of apply that information to specify what groups they need to be in, what kind of next step MindPrint assessments they want to be in. So it's really cool to see how this all really comes together. Thank you.
Unmute, of course, I'm on mute. That's just, part for the course. But Craig, I was going to have you wrap us up a little bit and just kind of summarize what we talked about today and just sort of the benefits. And then I want to open up to Q&A. Our Q&A is kind of exploding, and I want to make sure that we get to those questions for our attendees today.
Yeah. So I guess initially for us, this was taking a burden off the teachers, and you try to do that as decision makers, but you don't know the kids and they do. So we're just providing another piece of information about students that makes what we want to do without knowing all of the kids like the teachers do. So that the information we give them is much more meaningful, right? Otus allows us to put all of that information together. It allows us to take that cognitive piece that MindPrint gives us and put it with the SEL piece and the academic piece and the behavior piece. And it deals with, here's the cognitive skills. Here's what this kid or how this kid could potentially reach their highest achieving level ability. So yeah, just the integrating and the being able to tailor educational content to the individual student needs, potentially improving engagement and outcomes and student agency. Like, you know, Greg was talking about the kids that just stop because they're going to fail. They think they're going to fail, so they fail and don't put in the effort. So we're trying to bring that agency back. Like, oh, hey, here's a way I can be successful. Let's take this thing and apply it in these other places and see if it works. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know it's really helpful to hear people that are, you know, out in with boots on the ground and you know, helping students and helping teachers and colleagues every day. So we really appreciate your experience and your insights. And we have several questions that have been raised in the Q&A. So I want to go ahead and open that up. One's a cost question. So I can have, if somebody wants to, I typically sales will answer that question. I'm not in sales, but if you want to go ahead and reach out to me at the end and email me, I'll get in touch with the right person and I can tell you what the cost of MindPrint is. I think Vicki, our Senior Director of Learning, has been gracious enough to be handling the Q&A on the background, but I'd like to invite her to come back on camera if she can, because there's a question about what is teachers' reactions to these recommendations been. So Craig, I'll let you answer that first, and then I think Vicki could answer it from having worked with the hundreds of schools that are out there, what teachers' reactions have been to these recommendations.
Teachers, we're in the infancy of this, so it's not been fully blown out with all of them, but the teachers that I've been working with so far on this, they don't have to pick. It's less things for them to do, and they're seeing this kid kind of buy back in. It's not 100% effective. Obviously, nothing is, but the kid does it. They try it. It works. We know what this kid's thing is, and part of our teachers' buy-in is the MindPrint assessment takes about an hour for the kids to do. Yes, it's another assessment, but we had every member of our staff do it first so they could see exactly what it was going to be. So I do that because the teacher buy-in will be greater because they know. And I know that like the students get frustrated sometimes when they do it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it's hard. You know what that means? It's testing a cognitive area where you probably don't have a strength. Yeah. Move on. Go to the one that you liked, that was fun, that was easy, and we're going to focus in there, right? So the teachers did the same thing. I took it and it was like, yep, it makes sense, but like within my own teaching, I taught to the kid that I was.
Yeah.
And not everybody's the kid that I was. And it's once you have that realization, I think the buy-in is huge.
Vicki, do you want to answer it from?
So
she had all the personal learning, so you're a former teacher yourself.
So when teachers have these strategies that are curated for certain students, then it gives them the ability to not just say, you know, I'm going to try strategy after strategy after strategy. So you're matching up the right strategies with the right groups of students. And so it's not that there's strategies that the teachers have never seen before. Like these are all sort of out there in the field, but it's all about the matching with the right students, and which just makes things more efficient. Additionally, it also puts a bit of the responsibility on the student themselves, right? They're building their own toolbox for learning that is going to carry them through elementary, middle, and high school and beyond. And so the students, when they're grouped and they have these assignments, the way Craig has described, they're able to even be with each other in groups and talk to each other about these strategies. So what I've heard from teachers that over time, and it takes a while to build habits, we all know that as adults, but also for students, it takes time to build good habits. But over time, students start talking about these strategies amongst themselves, and they talk about, they use the vocabulary that's in the MindPrint, they use the vocabulary that's in these study strategies, like using your stronger visual memory to create visual flashcards, let's say, whereas Craig brought up reading text out loud and can make the whole difference. So they're kind of, teachers have heard students studying for a test together, talking about these strategies amongst themselves. The students start to take ownership over their own learning as well, which that's beautiful for teachers too, right? They're teaching the students, but the students are also taking part in this process, which is the whole goal.
Absolutely. Somebody was asking about teachers, about the efficacy and the research. And if you go to mindprint.com, you can scroll over to cognitive skills, and on that menu, go to the bottom there, that's research and efficacy. So you can see any linking studies, additional studies that have come out, and we'll go ahead and we'll share that in our follow-up email with you as well, so that you can have quick access to that. But if you can't wait one more second, you can head over there and check out all the great research that's done. I think one of the most amazing things that our founder did was spend an enormous amount of time making sure that we had the greatest product and, you know, the most evidence-based practices and research that's out there. And I think, as evidenced of having Dr. King on board, you could see that it's absolutely critical to our mission to make sure that we are grounded in research. Somebody was asking, can you put somebody in touch with high school? Absolutely, we'd be happy to do that with you afterwards. And I'm glad that Craig was here too, to talk about the elementary school level. And Greg, I don't know, Dr. King, can you talk about how this could help, or Craig, maybe you had this experience, and when you were drilling down your data, of how the MindPrint data insights was helpful for higher performing students.
Greg, do you want to start or you want me to?
I haven't touched that area yet, so you have at it.
Yeah.
Sure. The MindPrint results specifically towards high achieving students it still tells you that same day of how students learn and where their strengths are, so that you can continue to build into that, right? So for some students, maybe it's that they're not challenging enough with the academic material, but where are the ways that we can help them continue to grow, even if that material it consists of things that come easy to them. How can we challenge those students? How can we help educators and teachers see, hey, this student's doing really well. Here are the areas where we can challenge them so they continue to grow. And it goes back to that grouping, whether you're grouping with students where you can see very quick improvements, or grouping with students that are meeting the kind of where you'd expect it to be and helping them exceed those expectations and continue to grow. It's the same concept. It's about growth, and it's about allowing students ownership over their learning as well, and teachers to empower their students in those same ways, and helping teachers meet those students' needs, because they understand now better what those strengths are, and they understand better how they can help those students as well.
think that's about all the questions we have. Hillary, was there anything, or Craig, is there anything else you would like to share before we wrap up?
All good here.
Okay. There was a question about the strategy, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly because I do want to show you what we do offer. So we have, you know, all kinds. This is my screen expanded for some reason. Of course, Murphy's Law, my Chrome is deciding to crash. But we have reading and writing, math, study skills, all executive functions. So all different kinds of strategies that you can use for you know, for different learning profiles. But I will say that the real power of using these strategies is making sure that they are cognitively aligned to the specific learning profile, and having that overall whole child picture of the student, you know, in Otus is really helpful as well. We do have, as Craig alluded, we have our own dashboards built in MindPrint, where you can drill down at the district level, class level, school site level. So you can run your numbers there as well. But if you do happen to use any other sort of achievement data, you know, Craig had referenced NWEA, but if you use iReady or anything like that, we'd be happy to share with you a sample of how we integrate our data with those academic profiles as well. So before I want to go back over to, oh gosh, here we go. I wanted to get over to the final slide here and just share with you that this is our contact information. So if you want to reach out to us, we will be following up with you immediately following this webinar with our contact info, but also with next week with any resources and recordings. So stay tuned, save the date. We've got a bunch of other great webinars coming up this next month. On May 8th, we're going to be talking about how to address the summer slide with the science of learning. And that's in our partnership with the Teaching Channel. And then on May 17th, we're focused on math, about how to untap possibilities, embracing the science of learning to accelerate math outcomes. And we've got a superintendent and assistant superintendent from 2 different districts. They're going to be joining us and talking about that. And then finally on May 29th, our partnership with Modern Classroom, we're going to be hearing from some elementary school teachers about how they're preparing for the school year next year, so that they can get that done now, enjoy the summer, and feel fully prepared in the fall by using cognitive science and the science of learning to effectively help their students. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Otus. You're such a fabulous partner and our awesome customer, Craig. And please say thank you to Salem School District for giving us, you know, 50 minutes of your time today. We know your time is so valuable, and we're so thankful that you know, you're willing to set aside some time to help out other fellow educators across the United States and the world, frankly. So have a beautiful day, everybody. We'll talk soon. We hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye.